So some philosophical concepts. Let's go through them. Those are often being talked about in the cognitive, non-cognitive debate context. First concept: what is cognitive underdetermination?
Yeah, okay. But this is an idea. It's really a point of view of a particular philosopher called David Wiggins in explaining an experiential theory of meaning. So he's trying to work out what is meaning. How can we find a coherent theory of meaning? So he's discussing cognitive and non-cognitive theories of meaning. So explains this with the myth of the Sisyphus. He tells us that if we have a non-cognitive theory of meaning, let's use Sisyphus. So Sisyphus is rolling a boulder up a hill, and it's continually rolling down again. So where does he get his meaning from to continue his work? If there is no point to his work, he just has to continually push it up the hill and it rolls down again. Where does he get? And Wiggins said there must be something injected into his veins that is not like a purpose. Like he's pushing rocks up the hill, and one day there'll be a temple built at the top of the hill. So that would be a cognitivist theory of meaning. But a non-cognitivist theory of meaning in which he'll be pushing this rock up the hill, it's rolling down all the time, but it is still meaningful. How can it be still meaningful? Because something is injected into his veins. It's not an idea, it's a feeling. And what is injected into his veins are values. Values somehow are injected into his veins. So this is a non-cognitive theory of meaning. But of course, Wiggins is very critical of this idea, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, because meaning cries out for conclusions, it cries out for outcomes. How can you have meaning without outcomes? But I mean, in some sense, we have to find this non-cognitive aspect. In my view, we have to find this non-cognitive aspect of meaning because our lives end like that. Nothing we do stands. We do a lot of things in life. Whatever we do, we build a house and it falls down. We have a family and we die, and one day they will die. I mean, so we are in the same position as a Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill. So how do we find this non-cognitive theory of meaning? Okay, so Wiggins, I mean, perhaps I'd like to give, you might want to hear my answer. But I mean, Wiggins, he's very skeptical about how, and for all kinds of reasons. He gives a very interesting discussion, an informed discussion of the nature of truth and reason. Very well, quite difficult, but worth reading about. But so he said, well, it must be the case that we must have reason and cognition as part of that meaning. But it doesn't work out. We can't find the reasons of meaning, the reasons and purposes and thoughts to construct that meaning. So those processes of cognition are underdetermined. So that's just what he's talking about, cognitive underdetermination, that we want to find a theory of meaning, and perhaps based on cognition, and perhaps in some form of interrelated complexity, perhaps this meaning might be found, but we can't find it. So he describes his alternative theory as a cognitive underdetermination. I mean, there are other theories in philosophy like this, where solutions aren't found, but people still hang on to the basic understanding that they want to present. In theory of mind, for example, Donald Davidson talks about anomalous monism. anomalous monism. So monism is the idea that mind and body and physicality are basically one thing. So, so he said, well, we'd like to...
Like atomism, is it monism?
We'd like to show this, but we cannot show this. Even in principle, there is a disparity between neurological events, and mind events. Because some people think that there is a correspondence. You call this a correspondence theory of mind, that for every mental event there is a physical event in the brain. Okay, but he said, oh, okay, fine. But he said that in a principle there can never be a correspondence that's complete. So to explain that view, he describes it as anomalous monism. Anomalous monism. Yeah. So So it's a clever way of saying we don't know the answer. Similar to a cognitive underdetermination.
Yeah, I heard that word many times. Yeah, we don't know the answer. In context terminology terms, inconsistency, contradiction, and incoherence. What is the difference between these seemingly very similar terms?
Contradiction is when one idea flagrantly contradicts another idea. I think that all women are beautiful, but this woman is ugly. That I contradicting myself.
Okay.
Inconsistency. I go for a walk every day, but on Mondays I don't. So I'm inconsistent. It's not contradictory, but it is inconsistent.
But is it not contradictory?
Only if I say I go for a walk every day, and then contradictoriness is something that is.
Sorry. Maybe I did not understand it properly. So I go for a walk every day except Mondays. I'm not stating both of these things. I'm stating these things together, right? Like, so what would be the contradiction here if I would say I go for a walk every day, and then I would say I do not go for a walk on Mondays.
Yeah.
Now that would be contradiction.
Yes.
But when I say I go for a walk every day except on Mondays, now then I am being inconsistent.
Yeah.
Because on Mondays I don't.
Another way to express it, I think that contradiction is an event of speech and logic, but inconsistency is an event of action. I think. I mean, that's one way to, like you have somebody, I have a very good worker. He works so hard, but some days he sleeps. He's very inconsistent.
Yeah, so some days he just doesn't come. So he works hard when he's here.
Yeah.
I see. All right. So incoherence seems to be again a speech.
Doesn't make sense. It is what is an incoherent idea? Somebody, it might be a belief in something. What could it be? He believes an incoherent idea would be God is perfect and he looks after the world in a perfect way, but there is so much pain and the suffering in the world. We could call that an incoherent idea.
And that'd be a contradiction.
Maybe. But
the contradiction could be okay.
It's an idea that doesn't make sense. You know, it needn't be a contradictory. I mean, if there's a contradiction, I mean, it's a strong, contradiction. I mean, I would, you know, these are just words, really. I mean, defining words, not very interesting to do. Look up. I mean, AI can do a better job than me.
All right, so something even more interesting. Why is there something instead of nothing?
Now, this is another question, like, what is the meaning of life? That is a mistaken question. I mean, why is there something rather than nothing? Okay, so a lot of people have spent a lot of time over this question, but it's asking for a purpose. It's looking for some, it's asking the why word. It's using the why word. Why is there something, you know, what purpose is there that brought the world, brought the existence into being?
Or a cause?
I mean, is that the question? If it's that the question, I think it's framed in the wrong way. That's what I'm saying. If somebody would say, what are the circumstances that brought physical existence into the world? Yeah, great. I could accept that. What are the causes the underlying the existence of the world? Yeah, I could accept this. But why is there something rather than nothing? It is implying that there is some underlying purpose to the world that you can find out about. And this is a misnomer in the order of Plato and Aristotle. I mean, Plato and Aristotle defined things, and Plato will stick to Plato and Aristotle. I mean, define things in a number of ways, but purpose was one of them. Like, how do we define a rock? Okay, a rock is round, it's heavy, it's made out of stone, and its purpose is to bury itself deeper into the ground towards the center of the earth. In the modern world, philosophers and scientists don't define things in terms of purpose. They define things, we define things in terms of their overt characteristics. But what about a hammer? Like you say, a hammer is got a steel head on it, and it's got a wooden handle, and we use it. Its purpose is to bang in nails. And then you say, well, surely that's a purpose. You're defining it as a purpose. Yes, we are, but we understand that we have, attributed that purpose to it.
I agree with that, yeah. By the way. That's not the mystery for me. Maybe it's a different mystery for others, but what's mysterious for me is that why is there reality, not what's the purpose of it.
But if I think this is for scientists to work out, not for philosophers. It's a scientific question about the world. But if you wanted some exciting answers, we could say, Bishop Berkeley thinks that the world is the mind of God. Mm-hmm. It's we're living in the mind of God. Or we could say, there is really no matter at all. We only think that we're matter because it's relatively materialistic, but really there are only energies and structures. And we're in a world of energies and structures which don't need any matter. And that's how matter came into the world, because there is no matter. We're just energy and structure. But because we're all energy and structure, it feels like we are matter. So what? I don't think it's important. I think it's a mistake.
It's fascinating, but
yeah, sure.
Ultimately,
yeah, right. So great, be fascinated, investigate the question. What could it mean? But in the end, it's mistaken. It's a good example of how Wittgenstein said, we don't resolve problems, we dissolve them. This is a problem that can be dissolved.
I see.
We just explain what it means, we deconstruct it, and we could argue, well, it's not really a question that's worth a philosopher's time. I mean, maybe, if you have a deep interest in this question, you can spend a lot of time on it and have a lot of fun, and spend a lot of time thinking about it. But I wouldn't.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's move on to another aspect of reality, which is time, temporal neutrality, and time bias. We also went into this before.
Yeah.
Right, the past, the present, the future, they don't have an equal status.
I mean, Einstein said there were at least two types of time: the chronological time and experiential time. I think he actually gave the example that when you're kissing a girl, time goes by very quickly, but when you're doing something you don't like, it goes very slowly.
And you put your hand in a fire.
Yeah, whatever.
It goes very slowly.
Yeah. But I mean, more philosophically, what is it? I mean, interestingly, Heidegger described time as the horizon of being. Time is not only, it seems to me, an aspect of the physical world, that change needs time, and without time we wouldn't have any change. That time is I mean, again, scientists could explain this much better than I could. The relation of physical change and time. There is a scientific relation here between physical change and time. I think some scientists think that if there is no change, there is no time. That at the end of the universe, when everything dissipates and molecules and everything fly apart, and everything becomes a stasis, that is the end of time. But I mean, one of those ideas are very interesting because they make us think deeply about things. Like we think about what was time before the beginning of time, before the beginning of the universe, before the Big Bang, before there was time. How could we conceive of time? Well, I don't think we can. And even Immanuel Kant said we cannot think about things outside of time and space. We need time and space in order to conceive of things. I'm not interested in these questions, really. I'm interested in what does time mean for us. I'm interested in pragmatic questions about what does time mean for consciousness, and sort of we are moving through time and space in consciousness. And Heidegger and Husserl saw temporality as an essential structure of consciousness, that we are in time just as much as we are in space. And just as we're talking earlier about a externalist notion of consciousness, of mind, that we need not only a brain to be conscious, we need an external space to be conscious, but we also need time. We need to be passing through time. Without temporality, there can be no consciousness. And Husserl said every experience is necessarily preceded by another one. That consciousness is a process in time. So time is a horizon of being, as Heidegger said, and time is a constituent.
Didn't Kant say that space and time are forms of our perception?
Yes. I don't. Yeah, I shake my head because I disagree. Kant was a great philosopher, but every great philosopher has said some very strange things. I think that,
including you.
Yeah. But because I think in order, but I'm not a great philosopher. But I mean, but in order to think outside the conventions, you're thinking outside the conventions. Where do you stop? I mean, there's a bit of a problem here, what are the borders? Sometimes you go too
There is
far.
always a deeper layer of
Yeah, you go too far. That's a problem. And I think you've gone too far here.
I see.
I mean, you can see, certainly with Kant, in other ways, he has gone too far.
Let's move on to a very important topic, at least for me. We're going to first talk about framing and engagement with positive and negative, and then move on to death and death of others. Let's start with comprehending the world in terms of positivity and negativity. Positive and negative events, things, tools. Is that a viable way to think about the world in terms of positive and negative things?
Well, I think it's how we do think about the world. I mean, we do think about the world in negative and positive ways. Yeah, I mean, and then we get asked the question, how it's difficult not to, and yet some schools of thought try to. But then you can say, well, is that reasonable? Is that reasonable not to think about the world in positive and negative ways? Like Buddhists, for example, or Stoics. But Buddhists might want to say, there is no good or bad. There's just, existence. If we have a bad experience about something, it's because we're holding on to something about it. It's our own fault. Good or bad. I mean, there are good or bad experiences in the world. I mean, the question is usually about how to respond to bad experience, how to deal with bad experiences. Because, it's rather, assumed that we know how to deal with good experiences. But I wonder if it's the same kind of question.
Can we stay at good experiences for a moment? It's not that obvious, is it? Because overly engaging with good experiences lead to heroin addiction, right? Like there is some argument to be made of not overly engaging with positive things.
I mean, the immediate example that comes to mind is, praise. We enjoy praise or endorsement. Quite difficult to know how to respond to praise, because you just either lap it up, say, yeah, great. I mean, I'm the wonderful person you're talking about. But I mean, I think we have to take this in a moderation. We need to have a perspective about this. Say, well, thank you very much. I am a human being, and I rely upon my environment and other people's opinions to understand myself and for my personal identity. But but to what extent should we be overwhelmed by praise? We need to have a moderation here. We need to have a balance here. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing that we can say about good experiences, I think. And then we can perhaps say a similar thing about bad experiences. That, let's not be overwhelmed by them, that we need to have a moderation, that when something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. But this is just a rather pragmatic way of looking at things. I mean, particularly Buddhists and Stoics have got more formulated ideas about what this means. I mean, so Buddhists, for example, they would tend to think, well, it's because you have a attachment. Your pains are caused because you have attachment to things you can't give up. But I think this is just plain wrong. It's a mistake because obviously it seems to me that we have lots of pains and hurt that are not caused because I have attachment to things. I mean, that's just a fact of life, so just by giving up, I mean, it may be, I don't think it is, it may be a good idea to give up unwarranted, attachment to things. But, certainly it's not going to be a panacea. So that's one thing I would say about the Buddhist view. Another thing I would say about the Buddhist view is that this attitude of detachment, I wonder if it's healthy. I mean, isn't it that we grow, we become more of a person by coming, engaged with the world, by coming engaged with people, by having, experiences, by actually being hurt, by saying, well, I was hurt. Let's think about that. Why was I hurt? I can find out things about myself from being hurt, and detachment seems to ignore all that, seems to dismiss all that. So Slavoj Zizek, he also makes a criticism of Buddhism and unexpectedly praises Christianity in this sense. And he says that Buddhism, he says, avoids or dismisses these aspects of the world. But he says that Christianity engages with the dark heart of life, that Christianity engages with the darkness, with the blackness, with the negativities of life. And it does this perhaps because of this, the central idea of Christianity, of the hero, Jesus Christ, dying on the cross, taking on, the finitude of humanity and even death, to the point of death. So in this way, he sees Christianity as more honest, more truthful, perhaps, if we can use that word, than Buddhism. Stoicism has a similar, approach to Buddhism. So Stoicism, encourages an attitude of indifference. You can see this attitude in perhaps in Lucretius' advice about one's attitude to death. So he says, we are not concerned about the vast expanses of time that existed before we were born, then why would we be concerned about the vast expanses of time in which we don't exist after we die? But this seems to be a very rationalist and unrealistic conception of what human life is about. I mean, we have no preconception of the time before we existed, but we have a very good conception of the time after or what might happen afterwards. And so we are here and we realize we're here, we want to continue. So again, you're sort of working towards perhaps the time bias idea that the future isn't the same as the past. And, we have projects, there are things that we want to do. We invest ourselves in things. We say, look, I want to do this, I want to do that. And if we die, we can't do them. It's a very good reason for not wanting to die. But Lucretius says, I don't bother about all that because it's just nothing. So his advice is literally, you don't have to worry because death is nothing. Well, you don't have to worry perhaps if you were a religious person and think you were going to hell, but you might want to worry if you're having a good life and it doesn't want to end.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Death is something that we are going to get to very shortly. For a moment, I would still like to talk about engagement with negatives, with the negative. When I invented the software and created the company, there was also another company that has been acting in very, very despicable ways towards me and us. Let me just give you some statistics here. Their Twitter account talks about us all the time. Our Twitter account doesn't talk about them at all. They are talking about us every single day. At the beginning, I identified sock puppets. They had many accounts. Those were coming after me online. During the years, they have built up a cult-like following, so I am not sure how much they are utilizing sock puppets anymore. But anyway, they built up a cult like following. Those are coming after us every single day. Oh, because they are the competition. Even though our development activity is 100 times larger than their development activity, and their software is not even that good to begin with. So anyway, here is the situation, and they play very, very dirty, like very dirty. The point is, we have to deal with negativity, negative events and attacks in a very regular basis. We have a problem because we don't know what to do, and we tried everything. We tried to be indifferent. We tried to reason with them. We tried to engage with them with kindness. We tried to get after them, write an article or something like that. But that creates much more like resentment and much more conflict. So nothing is really seen to work, but obviously some things work better than others. The topic of how to engage with negative things in the world, and here is my solution, and it's based on your work. So first of all, what I'm trying to do is that when I have the chance, I do not, my default position is to not engage with negativity, with negative things. And I am now generalizing to more negative things, not only about this company, but my default, I do not engage, except if it has to do something with survival, right? Like mine or company or whatnot. Growth, like the negativity is so problematic that it is making you shrink, basically. What else? There is like a moral reason to that this event has to be engaged. There is no other way. And there is something else that doesn't come to my mind. But the point is that you cannot be a Buddhist monk and be indifferent. You cannot grab your sword and go after them and go after it. Like these things don't work. This is the place where you need a very sophisticated philosophy to how to deal with the constant harassment. So there wasn't much of a question, but let's make it one. Do you have anything to add to engagement with negative, abstract things out there in the world than what we said so far?
Yeah, because firstly, from what you've said, you made it clear that there are different aspects of the problem which may need to be responded to in different ways. There's a economic aspect, perhaps a political aspect, a social aspect, a psychological aspect. The others were practical problem. Psychological aspect is one. Understanding, I think, is very useful. How does a psychiatrist deal with his patients? That would be very useful. Psychiatrist goes in and sees his patients, and decides that he hates this psychiatrist, and the patient is saying all the horrible things that he can about the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is sitting there. Yes, very good. I think it's possible not to be affected. I don't know. Because you understand that this is it's possible not to be affected. I think you are affected because of the neurological events that, you hear a word, somebody says something, fuck, and you have a emotional, response. You can't not have a emotional, response. So there is that aspect. But also there is there is a understanding. I mean, there's one case, a psychiatrist with a patient. Another one is perhaps a parent with a child. The child is saying he might say, "Oh, I hate you." It's quite common, isn't it? I mean, it's may be hurtful, but hurtful to a greater or lesser extent. The parent may say, "Oh, this is what I said when I was a child," and be able just to laugh about it. Other parents may take it to heart. I think, so we have a psychiatrist, a parent. We're having other, we're looking through different kinds of relations. Many professional situations, so we're getting closer to the actual problem now, in which these kind of events, occur. Teachers, I worked as a teacher for quite a few years, and we had an event in one of my classes. The teacher came running in from the next classroom because the children were playing up, and she was very distressed because they'd been throwing things at her. And it's part of a teacher's job to be professional and unmoved by these things. And it's not only part of, because you understand what's going on, you're there to do that job, and you get on with that job. Because you're in the persona of that job, you can do these things you couldn't do as an individual. If you are if you are a pastor, if you're a priest, you can go up on the pulpit and you can say all these things, that God is love and he loves you and you must go to church on Sunday. If you were an ordinary person, if you weren't a priest, you couldn't stand on the street corner and say these things. It's because you have that convention that surrounds you that enable you to do these things. So, I mean, as a professional, I think that professionality enables us to do things we ordinarily can't do. That, as a teacher, we stand there and say, "Oh, I do this. It's my job," And not only that, it's my job, and I understand what my job is, and I understand that these are children, and I'm a teacher, and I know what's going on, and they don't. And apart from that, when I was a teacher, I loved my children. I thought they were so charming. I didn't tell them that I love you, but for me, I love children, and I love to go into the classroom every day and see them. It just made me very happy. And we had some difficult classes. You may be surprised that in Singapore, there's some very difficult classes. I've had some, the headmaster came in, warned me one day about the class. We have a difficult class here. Okay, that's fine. So, I mean, with some classes, practically never. You're teaching all the time. Some classes, most of the time, is dedicated to disciplining the children. You don't have much time for teaching, but this was a disciplinary class. Just trying to control them. So, like he said, just write out. He prepared these forms to write up the names of the naughty children. And he put the form, I was writing down the names. I put the form down on the table, and it would come up, screw it up, and throw it out the window. That's how naughty they were. But I didn't really mind. I thought it, good spirit. I thought good spirit. Meet people like that in Singapore, and older children, 18, 17. Because we, the last few years of schooling, I had like. Sometimes they would, organise their desks at the back of the class like a fort. Like, you're not coming through here, there. And again, I thought, wow, that's, I sympathise with you so much, because when I was at school, I hated it. And I thought that why would I be forced to be in school? And I think, well, you're doing the right thing. You're trying to protect your, identities, And really, if life was healthy and society was healthy, you would be out fighting wars and having children and things, you know. But no, you're stuck in here. You have to listen to me. Does that help? Almost practical. What I'm saying here, you know, it's a mixture of philosophy, practicality, and love. Life is complex, isn't it? Yeah, we can talk about a much more philosophical answer, but this is
That's good enough.
That's a practical answer for practical.
That's good enough. So, but the adoption of a principle of positivity has primacy over that of negativity.
Yeah, so we got so underlying all this. I mean, people like Stephen in my philosophy group, he said, "Why are you so positive?" You know, and so, well, maybe it's just I have the right brain makeup. My brain was produced in the right kind of way, but maybe there's something more philosophical there. I think there is something right about having a positive attitude, having positive states, and something wrong about having negative states. I think the positive states are productive of more positive states, and negative states produce more negative states. I mean, it's a progression down a certain course. Be more philosophical. Why, you know, not why is there something rather than nothing, but why be positive rather than negative? You know, Schopenhauer taught, you know, he's the most negative philosophy you can find, and he says nature teaches us something better, that it's better not to exist. You know, so is it better not to exist, or is it better to exist? You know, this is quite fun, you know, fundamental. Or Shakespeare said, "To be or not to be." That is the question. You know, so yeah, it's not quite to be. The question isn't quite not to be, but is it be? Is it the question is to be better or not to be better, or to be positive or not? And existence isn't something that either exists or does not exist. So we can pose it in another way. Is it better to be human than a chimpanzee? Is conscious existence better than less conscious existence? I mean, some people would think, it's better to be less conscious. You know, let's be a chimpanzee, let's be a duck. It's even better. There's no problems there, you know. And how can I do that? Well, I can take drugs or whatever, or I can lay in bed all day, or get drunk. I mean, there's lots of ways of not being so conscious. So why is it better to be conscious, to be more conscious than less conscious? That's my question. You know, rather than why is there something rather than nothing. My question is, why is it better to be more conscious than less conscious? I mean, better is a very difficult, you know, why is this chair better than that? You know, better than that chair. Very difficult to have a priority like that, especially with something like consciousness. And, you know, I think, well, at least a greater consciousness has a greater potential for value. You know, I have a greater potential for value as a human being than a chimpanzee.
And someone who has more positivity has greater consciousness.
What do we mean by consciousness? I mean, in my view, I talk about awareness, because I mean, consciousness is such a ambiguous term. So we have to talk about consciousness. So I wouldn't say that because it's too difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think if people have a more positive attitude, I think that is conducive to greater awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about
all right. You know, let me tell you an anecdote here. Some years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, a young guy came to our company and he started writing documentation. You know, he had no previous experience. He read a lot of Austrian economics. He worked at a bank, but you know, he was 20 years or 22 years old, very young, right? But he also had something. he was the most positive person I've ever seen. A coworker described him like, I think something is wrong with him. How can someone be so positive all the time? This is crazy. and you know what happened with this person? We made him the CEO of our company now, because we realized that, well, this is a person we want to be around. He's inspiring. He's great. So he's now our CEO, and that's where positivity gets you sometimes.
But also, I'd like to add something to my discussion of why we should be more positive, because I'd like to say that I concluded with the idea of value. That I'd rather be a human being than a chimpanzee, because as a human being, I have a potentiality for value. Not because I have a potentiality for intelligence, not because I have a potentiality for consciousness, not because I have a potentiality for happiness, but because I have a potentiality, potentiality for value. So that's just a point that I'd like to make.
Let's move on, and let's talk about when you don't have the potentiality of value, the absence of your future, your death. Now, one interesting thing in your book was that there are two problems here with our death. One is the people are fearing the events leading up to our death, and the other is our non-existence, what comes after our death. I don't think we have to go into religious things here, like non-existence, right? The absence of ourselves. So I did not think too much of my death before. That just wasn't a topic on my mind, but you seem to did. So yeah, what's the take of it?
I mean, different schools of thought, different people have different attitudes to death. As we've seen with the Stoics, and existentialists have a very, see it as a abomination, something that shouldn't happen. But it seems to have this existentialist view seems to bring a lot of preconceptions along with it. I mean, it seems to be overreactive. I mean, I don't like to say we need a more neutral, a more balanced, a more moderate response, because it is something that naturally we don't want to happen, because we want to be alive, we want to be here, we want that existence to continue. But in the same way, there's a paradox here. We want to continue with our existence, but we also need to find an attitude in which we're able to come to terms with the end of that existence. So how do we find that attitude? Chesterton, the writer, he said, to be a good soldier, he must fight with a furious indifference to his death. To be good, really to be good at anything, you must be furiously, and we're coming back to this notion of, indifference, again, I don't really like. But nevertheless, there is an idea there of, even you could use that for a businessman or a gambler, perhaps, to be a good gambler. You have to take the risks, or to be a good, businessman, you're no good sweating about it. You just got to take these risks, or to be a racing driver. We just had some races here. You can't be thinking all the time, I might crash and die. You have to come to terms in some way with that end that we don't want to happen. So how do we integrate that absence, that lack of the future into our present? Seeing death as the lack of a future, I think, is important, because it's the absence of the future. And then we say, well, death is the absence of the future. Yeah, it's the absence of the future. Well, what does that say about the present? I think we're trying to find something about the present that can resist the absence of the future, that can confront the absence of the future. I always come back to the same idea. I'm very boring. What is it that can, in the present, that can resist, can confront the absence of the future?
Sufficient value?
A sufficiency in some kind, something that's adequate enough
Meaning?
in the present to confront the absence of the future. So what could it be? Being clever? I don't think so. Being happy? Maybe. I don't think. But to me, I think a sufficiency of value, and I think there are examples that we find of this in life. One adequacy of value is love. One sufficiency of value in love, and we find many people who can confront their death because of love. Because we find parents who can die not because they want to die, but that find some way to come to terms with their death for the love of their children. They say, I die because of, this is so common. Or soldiers, they're dying for the love of their country. It's such a common thing. But what is it? What's going on here? Because I think they're finding a sufficiency of value. So that's my response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the smartest thing I've heard about death, to be honest. That's my best bet if I ever have to face. Let me tell you something. I'm gonna bring you a whole new world of thoughts that you will hear a lot more about. Are you familiar with Brian Johnson?
No.
Okay. Brian Johnson is someone who made $500 million a while ago, and then he sold his company, and then he hired a team of people, doctors, physiotherapists, whatnot, and created a system called the Blueprint, where his only goal is do not die. His goal is to get a ticket into the future because he wants to see what's going to be happening in the future, and we might have a chance of not having to die from, I'm not talking about immortality here, right? Like if someone,
sure,
then that's the end. But like not having to die from traditional ways, from right?
Disease.
Like disease or reversing aging, right? Yeah. He's 45, by the way, and so it does seem like he's making good progress in that. His entire for 4 years now, I believe, every single day he's it's so funny. Okay, so this is the don't die aspect. But another aspect is what he's always talking about is that his mind is his enemy. He believes that his mind is the one that's always want to trick him into doing stuff that gets him closer to dying, like eating this piece of chocolate or something like that. So he figured out a way, and I'm not kidding. We're going to talk about the divisibility of mind later, and this gets into that. So he sits down and he's talking with other Brians, like Evening Brian and I don't know, Liver Brian or whatnot. He's measuring himself with all kinds of stuff, and everything that he does is basically he tries to unite his entire body and humanity and whatnot. Yeah, so the idea is that he's using algorithms, and he doesn't give any authority to his mind to make any decisions of what he's going to do and when. That's a philosophy that's emerging lately, and you know, this longevity circles, as technology is getting better and is becoming more and more feasible, are getting more and more voice. So what are your initial thoughts about spending most of your waking life on trying to delay your death?
Well, you know, I think it's a bit futile.
It's a lot.
A bit futile. But I mean, I think it, you know, as Nietzsche said, if you want to have a meaningful life, you choose something to do and you do it. So it's a great objective. Choose something. This is a wonderful way to pursue a wonderful, you know, objective. You know, but realistically, I think there are better ways to live one's life. Of course, I mean, I've told you what my response to death is. You know, a philosophy of value.
You still need it. I mean,
So
it's not guaranteed.
So his response is, I mean, it's quite a nice idea that he has about his mind is trying to deceive him. Well, of course it is, but I mean, it's not the totality of your mind that's trying to deceive you. We are many things. There's many aspects to our minds, and we are impelled to do all kinds of things. I mean, like sexual behaviour, our instincts are motivated, or one part of us is motivating us towards sexual activity. And we indulge in sexual activity. And then after the sexual act, we think, oh, why did I do that? You know, we feel sad because something has gone. But that's because nature is using you to produce, to procreate. Nature doesn't care about you. Nature cares about maintaining the species. So you're just, you know, in Schopenhauer's way, in this person's way, you know, you're just, the mind is tricking you into doing something. Well, you may want, but not as much as you think you want to do it. Yeah, but I mean, you know, but still, we can think about this. We can know what's going on and say, yeah, well, I mean, I know that it's nature that's doing this, but can't we use nature? I mean, I can enjoy it as well. I can enjoy doing this, and I can love other people. It helps me to be a better person, even not a worse person. So I mean, yeah. So I find this, you know, there's lots of strange ideas around.
If you fail to extend your life, then your next best chance is to have such a meaningful life, a sufficiency of value in the present, that death will be worth it. It's not that it's going to be worth it, but you will be able to withstand it, right?
But I mean, I think it's a different kind of answer. I think simply the extension of I mean, you know, I like Nietzsche's story about the eternal return. Nietzsche was walking along one day and a demon or something came up and sat on his shoulder, and it said to him, just think, if everything you are doing this day would be repeated over and over again in the same way, and could you, what would your response be to that? You know, would it be joy?
I had a good day, yeah.
Or would it be horror? Horror, because it would just be repeating again and again and again the same problems, the same pains. So, to me, it's a test. If you have really achieved what Nietzsche thinks you should achieve, the amor fati, the love of life, the positive attitude to life, the positive attitude to every moment of your day, then you would say, yes, I love it, again and again and again. In that case, yes. But that is, if you haven't achieved that, the amor fati that Nietzsche was recommending, then that continual, that, you know, eternal, you know, return, or that, you know, eternal life that religion proposes, would not be the greatest wonder, but the greatest horror. That it's not a life extension. So this is my answer to life extension. That life extension is not an answer. It is an answer, but it's not the answer. I mean, it's still, even if you go to heaven and have eternal. I mean, people sometimes say to me, "Oh, what if you go to heaven? What are you going to do then?" I'm going to continue my phenomenology in heaven, because there's still going to be lots of questions I have in heaven, and not going to be suddenly, people haven't got a notion. Oh, you go to heaven and that's it. Well, you mean all the questions are suddenly answered that I have? I mean, what about me? What about my personal identity? So what I'm saying is that extension is not an answer. Immortality is not an answer. It's part of an answer, but it's not the answer.
The death of others. Again, a topic I did not think too much about in my life. Death of others were very rare, and as I'm growing up, it's becoming more and more frequent. But I can still count in one hand of significant people in my life who passed away. So you are more than twice the age of me. I think you encountered some things. You described different ways of how to respond to a death of another person. First, engagement with it doesn't sound like positive engagement. Doesn't sound like you wanna laugh and be very positive about someone's death. That's not the right one. Indifference, it's probably better than positive engagement, but it's still not the right thing. On the other hand, is like hate.
Grief, is it?
No, I mean like a complete negative engagement, like the worst kind of option that you could possibly choose to engage with. Like that's not good. So
yes,
So then what?
A resentment or hate.
Yeah. So that's the worst. So how to behave, how to conduct yourself in the world when someone passes away.
Having described these different kind of responses as not appropriate, I mean, I think that we have kind of like the Buddhist and the Stoic views, and they're trying not to experience the hurt. I think that's the wrong way to approach it. With Slavoj's approach, I think that Christianity, as much as I don't like to say it, has got something to offer here. That I think there's a way of embracing hurt. And I think that when people die that we love, we can't help but be hurt. We're going to be hurt. And the question then, I think, is how do you respond to the hurt? How do you cope with the hurt? We can go through a number of ways of how to cope with hurt. Repress it, pretend it's not there. Indulge in it. So, or pity oneself. So, I am hurt, and I will keep this hurt for the rest of my life and make it even more intense. Or we can, I think, be more realistic. Yeah, I'm hurt, but what does this hurt mean? Hurt is a part of life. We're physically hurt. The physical hurt is different from emotional hurt, but I think we can still have a similar response to it. Does it have to be? Yeah, I mean, I think that coming to terms with it, I think, is important first. I mean, and I don't use the word acceptance, because acceptance means there's nothing we can do about it, and we're passive objects to this experience. No, I'm not a passive object to this experience. So I come to terms with it, and I acknowledge the reality of the hurt. I don't want to, I'm immediately say, well, there is an answer, but I think, we could say, we could take something like a Nietzsche and say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We could look at it in a positive light, but you might say, well, it's not going to make me stronger. It's going to weaken me. It might well do. So how do we cope with that then? How do we cope with it? I have a hurt, and it is making me weaker.
Learning to cope with the hurt could make you stronger.
I think that's a good option, okay? But I'm looking at a worse. What happens if it doesn't make you stronger? What happens if it makes you weaker? Which it sometimes does. Sometimes trauma weakens us. Sometimes hurt weakens us. That is a fact of life. It doesn't always make us stronger. So it's a nice idea to make it, and it might encourage us a little bit. It might be a nice fiction to get through, to deceive ourselves with. I mean, we need these fictions, What if it's not, if it doesn't make us strong? So we need something else. We need something that's more important than the hurt. So, what is more important than the hurt? The love of other people, perhaps everybody's dead. Everybody's dead. So love of oneself, perhaps. I mean, I don't know. But I really don't like to have to come back and say, it's the same answer. Self-love, self-value. But that's so crude. That's because I want to refine this idea. And the way I'm saying it in terms of self-love, self-value, these are very crude terms. And when I was writing my book, I thought to myself, shall I use these words at all? Or just leave them out and work it out for people, let people work out what I'm talking about, Because I think these words are far too crude. And the ideas themselves must grow out of one's thinking, grow out of the reading. But I thought, no, I will put these words in, because if I don't put these words in, people won't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was better, I think, to put the words in than to leave them out. So in this conversation, I feel the same way, that, it's better to use words like self-value, self-love, a sufficiency of value, although these are not adequate, are they, for life? Because life, the things that we find, these are just very crude ideas that what we find in life, what we work out in life is much more subtle than this. And I said before the other day that, everything can be described. Well, everything can be described that you can, conceive of and share with other people and find a word for it. But these things perhaps are difficult to, I think you can share. I mean, I remember when my father died, and we went to the grave and there were other people there. There are other people at the grave. They're also happy. They're also happy. So you can't always,
When I had a good friend and he died, although I haven't seen him for 5 years, but he died, and I went to his funeral, and it was really strange. It seemed like I was the only one crying in there. His mother was having to calm me down. It was a strange experience.
Yeah, I think sometimes when your relatives die, you find a way to resolve that hurt, immediately,
You have to.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson says that when someone dies, the way you should be the person who's the most reliable, who's the most responsible, that everyone else can trust on, and that will give you a sufficiency of value that other people, that you're here to help, even though it hurts you, others need you because you're the only one who.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is the rational approach. I mean, yeah, of course that's true, and that's a good idea, but still, whether, these are ideas, whether the ideas are sufficient. I mean, they're certainly a help.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
sharing this.
Thank you.